There is a particular kind of silence that lives inside an apartment after someone has left it deliberately. A silence that feels different from absence caused by death or distance, because it carries, underneath it, the specific knowledge that someone made a choice, and that choice was you weren't worth staying for. Or worse, you weren't worth even explaining the leaving to. I came home on a Tuesday evening in October to that exact silence, and I want to walk you through it slowly, because I've relived that walk through my own front door more times than I can count, searching it for some detail I must have missed, some warning sign that would have let me stop what was already, by the time I turned my key in that lock, already finished. My daughter Lily had hugged my leg that morning before I left for work, 4 years old, holding a stuffed rabbit she'd named Pancake for reasons neither my wife nor I had ever fully understood. And she'd asked me, with the specific gravity 4-year-olds bring to important questions, whether I'd be home before dinner. "I promise," I told her. "Save me some of whatever Mommy's making. I want you to understand that I meant that promise completely. The way you mean every small, ordinary promise you make to a child without imagining, even for a second, that it might become the last one you ever get to keep." My marriage to Lily's mother, Rachel, had been struggling for the better part of a year by that point. The ordinary, exhausting struggle of two people who'd married young and were discovering, slowly and painfully, that the people they'd become in their late 20s weren't entirely compatible with the people they'd been when they'd made their original promises. We'd argued more than we used to. We'd seen a counselor twice before Rachel decided, unilaterally, that she didn't think it was helping. I knew things were difficult. I didn't know, walking through that door that Tuesday evening, that difficult had already become final. The apartment was half empty, in a way that took my mind several full seconds to actually process as real, rather than some kind of mistake. Rachel's closet stood open and stripped bare. Lily's small bed, the one with the painted clouds on the headboard that I'd assembled myself over a single exhausting Saturday, sat without its sheets, without Pancake, without any of the small evidence of an actual child having recently slept there. There was no note. I want to emphasize that detail specifically, because I think people imagine these stories always include some explanation, however inadequate, left behind for the person staying. There was nothing. Just an apartment that had, within the span of a single workday, been quietly, completely evacuated of the two people who'd made it feel like a home. I called Rachel's phone 43 times that first night. I know the exact number because I wrote it down at the time, in a kind of numb, disbelieving compulsion to document something, anything, about what was actually happening to me. Every call went straight to voicemail, her recorded voice cheerfully informing callers she'd return their message soon. A cruel little echo of normalcy layered over what I was already beginning to understand was anything but normal. I called her parents next, people I'd known for 6 years, who'd attended our wedding, who'd held Lily as a newborn with the same besotted joy my own parents had shown. Her mother answered, her voice carrying a particular careful neutrality that I didn't yet have the experience to recognize as rehearsed. "I haven't heard from Rachel," she told me. "I'm sure she just needs some space, Ethan. Give it a few days." I gave it a few days, then a few weeks. Then I filed a missing persons report that the local police department, after a cursory investigation, classified as a likely voluntary departure rather than an abduction, since Rachel had taken her own car, her own belongings, and had, according to a single ATM withdrawal the detective managed to trace, accessed her own bank account in a different state 4 days after disappearing. A grown woman is legally allowed to leave with her own child. The detective explained to me, not unkindly, as long as there's no custody order specifically prohibiting it. And there had never been any need for a custody order in a marriage that, as far as either of us had known until that exact week, was still actively ongoing. I hired my first private investigator 3 months later, a retired police detective named Frank Castellano, who specialized in exactly this kind of disappearance. And I want to tell you honestly that I believed, that first year, that finding them was simply a matter of time and resources, that no two people could disappear completely in a country with as much digital infrastructure as ours had by then. I was wrong about that, in ways that would take me years to fully accept. Frank's early investigation traced Rachel as far as a small city 3 states away, where she'd apparently lived for several months under her own name before the trail went cold entirely. No forwarding address, no new employer he could locate, no school enrollment for a child matching Lily's age and description anywhere in the records he could access. People who genuinely don't want to be found, he told me, somewhere around the 18-month mark, and who have some resources and some patience, can disappear more thoroughly than most people imagine possible. I'm not telling you to give up. I'm telling you this is going to take considerably longer than either of us hoped, if it's even findable at all. It took years. I want you to understand the actual texture of those years, because I think the easy version of this story collapses them into a single montage of determined searching. And that's not what living inside them actually felt like. It felt like Tuesdays. It felt like ordinary, exhausting Tuesdays stretched out across an entire decade and a half, each one carrying the same low hum of unresolved loss underneath whatever else I was doing that day, going to work, eventually remarrying briefly, and then divorcing again, building a career, growing older in a body that kept aging forward while some essential part of me remained permanently fixed at the exact moment I'd walked into that half-empty apartment. I hired 3 more investigators over the following decade, each one picking up where the last had left off, each one eventually reaching the same exhausted conclusion that whoever was helping Rachel disappear, whether deliberately or simply through the ordinary mechanics of starting over somewhere new, had done so thoroughly enough that the trail simply ran out of substance to follow. I wrote Lily a letter every single year on her birthday, starting the first birthday after she disappeared, when she turned 5, a habit I began without any clear plan for how the letters would ever reach her, simply because the alternative, letting an entire year pass without marking the day that had once meant more to me than almost any other day on the calendar, felt like a second abandonment I wasn't willing to commit on top of the first one that had already happened to me against my will. I kept those letters in a growing stack in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, a small, accumulating monument to a relationship that existed, as far as I could determine after years of searching, only in my own memory and in 16 sealed envelopes nobody else on earth knew existed. My own parents watched this entire ordeal unfold from genuinely close proximity, watched me drain savings on investigators, watched me miss work for court dates that led nowhere, watched me age through my late 20s and into my 30s carrying a grief that had no funeral to mark it, no body to bury, nothing but an absence that simply continued, year after year, without resolution. You need to consider moving on, my mother told me, somewhere around year 8, her voice carrying what I understood at the time as simple maternal concern for a son she watched suffering without apparent end. I know how much you love her, Ethan, but you can't keep your whole life on hold for someone who might never be found. I didn't know, hearing that advice delivered with such convincing, exhausted compassion, that my own mother was speaking it from inside a secret she'd been carrying for years by that point. A secret that, had I known it at the time, would have ended my entire 16-year search in a single afternoon. I didn't know any of what I'm about to tell you while it was happening. I want to be honest about that up front, because everything in this section comes from conversations I had much later, pieced together from a daughter I'd lost, and grandparents who'd kept a secret so completely that even I, living inside my own desperate search the entire time, never once suspected they held the answer in their hands. Lily grew up in a small coastal city she'd later described to me as unremarkable in the particular way childhood places always are to the people who grew up inside them, ordinary, comfortable, entirely sufficient, until you have reason to wonder what else might have been possible. Rachel remarried when Lily was 7, to a man named Gregory who worked in marine logistics, and who, by every account Lily would eventually give me, treated her with a steady, uncomplicated kindness that filled at least some of the space a father's absence might otherwise have occupied. But there was always a space, Lily told me later, a specific, persistent ache that Gregory's genuine kindness never quite reached. Because Gregory wasn't the answer to the question she'd been quietly carrying since she was old enough to understand that other children had fathers who existed somewhere, even if those fathers weren't always present. What happened to my dad? She'd asked her mother, around age 6, the first time she remembers asking it directly. Rachel's answer, the one Lily would carry for the next 14 years as complete and final truth, was delivered with a particular gentle finality that left no room for follow-up questions a 6-year-old would know how to formulate. "He died, sweetheart, before you were old enough to really remember him. I'm sorry. I want to pause here and tell you something important about how this lie actually functioned, because I think it matters to understanding why it survived for 16 years rather than collapsing under its own weight far sooner. Rachel, as far as I would later understand from Lily's own careful reconstruction of those years, hadn't initially intended to maintain that lie forever. She'd told it in the immediate aftermath of leaving, as a simple, expedient way to close a painful subject with a confused young child who kept asking questions Rachel wasn't yet ready to answer honestly. But lies told to protect a child from immediate confusion have a particular tendency to calcify the longer they go uncorrected. And somewhere across the following years, correcting it would have required Rachel admitting to her own daughter that she'd simply left without explanation, without custody arrangement, without ever once allowing her child's father the chance to maintain any relationship with her at all. The lie became, gradually, easier to maintain than the truth would have been to finally deliver. My parents entered this story more directly and more deliberately than Rachel's initial convenient lie ever did. And this is the part that, even now, I have the hardest time fully reconciling with the people I'd believed my entire life that they actually were. They'd located Lily and Rachel through a cousin of Rachel's who'd maintained loose contact with our extended family, almost 4 years after the disappearance. Around the same time, I was draining my 3rd round of savings on a private investigator who kept assuring me he was close to a breakthrough that never actually materialized. My parents didn't tell me. I want you to sit with that fact for a moment, because I have sat with it repeatedly for longer than I can comfortably describe. My own mother and father knew, while I was searching with a desperation that consumed my entire adult life, exactly where my daughter was living, and they decided together to keep that knowledge entirely to themselves. They began visiting quietly, 2 or 3 times a year, careful, deliberate trips they described to me. Whenever I happened to ask about their travel, as visits to old friends or distant relatives, lies layered carefully on top of the larger lie they were already maintaining. They sent gifts on birthdays and holidays through Rachel's cousin, gifts that arrived at Lily's house with cards signed simply Grandma and Grandpa, with no last name attached, no return address, nothing that might have allowed a curious child to eventually trace the connection back to a father who was very much alive and searching for her. "Why did you do it?" I would eventually ask my mother, much later, once everything had finally surfaced. "Why would you keep that from me?" Her answer, when it finally came, carried an honesty more devastating than any excuse could have been. "Because if you found her, Ethan, you'd have moved to be near her. You'd have built a whole life around her, the way any good father would, and we would have lost you too. We'd already lost so much family by then. I couldn't stand the thought of losing the only connection we still had left to our only grandchild." I asked the question that mattered most directly. Did you ever correct what she believed about me? Did you ever once tell her I was alive? My mother's silence, in that moment, told me everything the rest of her explanation had been carefully avoiding. They had not simply allowed Rachel's original convenient lie to persist uncorrected. They had actively reinforced it, year after year, whenever Lily, growing slightly older, occasionally asked her grandparents directly about the father she barely remembered. "Tell me about my dad," she'd ask, during their visits, the particular careful curiosity of a child trying to assemble a complete person out of fragments nobody seemed willing to fully share. "He loved you very much," my mother would tell her, according to what Lily would eventually describe to me. "He died before you were old enough to know him properly. It's a very sad thing, sweetheart, but it happened a long time ago, and your mom and Gregory have built you a wonderful life since then." There was, devastatingly, even a photograph. A small, framed picture my mother brought during one visit when Lily was 9, ostensibly a memorial image, showing me at perhaps 25, smiling at some long-forgotten family barbecue. A photograph that Lily kept on her nightstand for years afterward. A small shrine to a father she believed had died before she could properly remember loving him. I have thought, more times than I can count since learning all of this, About that photograph sitting on my own daughter's nightstand for years while I sat, 3 states away, writing her birthday letters into a stack that kept growing without any recipient. 2 parallel grief rituals running simultaneously, neither of us aware that the other person they were grieving for was, in fact, very much alive and actively grieving the exact same lost relationship from the opposite direction. Lily grew into her teenage years, carrying that loss the way children carry losses they never fully had the chance to process directly, not as an acute, ongoing wound, but as a kind of quiet, settled absence, a missing piece she'd learned to build her identity around rather than against. She did well in school. She had good friends. She loved Gregory genuinely in the particular complicated way you can love a stepfather who's been kind to you while still carrying, somewhere underneath that love, an unresolved ache for the father you never got the chance to actually know. It was during her sophomore year of college, studying abroad for a semester in a program that required her to compile a family history project for an anthropology course, that the quiet, settled absence she'd carried her entire childhood began, for the first time, to feel less like settled fact and more like a question she'd never actually had the chance to fully investigate. I realized, she would tell me, much later, during our first real conversation as 2 adults rather than as a father and the 4-year-old daughter he remembered, that I didn't actually know anything concrete about my dad. Not where he was from originally, not what he did for a living, not even where he was buried. Nobody had ever given me a single specific detail beyond he died when you were young. I started wondering, for the first time in my entire life, why that was. Lily didn't tell anyone, not even Gregory, when she finally booked a flight back to the small Midwestern town where she'd been born. The place her mother had always described only in passing, careful, vague references that had never once included a specific address or a reason for the careful vagueness itself. She found the old apartment building through public records, a modest brick complex that had clearly been renovated since the family had lived there, and she stood outside it for a long time. She told me later, trying to summon some memory of actually having lived inside it as a small child, finding nothing but a vague, unreliable impression of yellow curtains that may or may not have ever actually existed. It was the woman living in the apartment next door, an elderly widow named Dorothy Castellano, who'd lived in that same building for over 20 years, who finally gave Lily something solid to hold on to. "You're Ethan's girl," Dorothy said, the moment Lily introduced herself and explained, haltingly, that her family had once lived there. "I'd know that face anywhere. You look just like him." "You knew my father?" "Knew him?" "Sweetheart, he came back to this building every single year for 16 years, sometimes more than once, asking the building manager and anyone who'd talked to him whether they remembered the family that used to live in Unit 4B. He never stopped looking for you. Never once." Lily stood in that hallway, she told me later, feeling something genuinely vertiginous move through her chest, the specific disorientation of hearing a sentence that directly contradicted an entire childhood's worth of careful, repeated explanation. "He died," she said, "when I was 4. My mom told me. My grandparents told me." Dorothy's expression, hearing that, carried a confusion that Lily recognized, even through her own mounting shock, as entirely genuine. "Honey, I don't know who told you that, but it isn't true. I had coffee with that man not 18 months ago, right at my own kitchen table, the same as I've done with him a dozen times over the years. He's about as alive as I am." Dorothy invited her in, and what she produced next, from a closet she explained Ethan had asked her to keep something in years earlier, just in case anyone ever came looking, was a sealed cardboard box that Lily would later describe as the single heaviest object she'd ever held, despite its actual physical weight being entirely unremarkable. Inside, organized by year, sat 16 sealed envelopes, each one addressed simply to Lily, each one dated for a birthday she'd celebrated without him, alongside a thick folder of private investigator receipts, missing persons report copies, and a journal Ethan had kept sporadically across those 16 years, documenting search efforts, dead ends, and on several pages Lily would later read with tears she couldn't fully stop. Simple, unguarded entries about missing a daughter he hadn't seen since she was 4 years old. Lily opened the letters in Dorothy's kitchen, one by one, in chronological order, watching a relationship unfold across 16 years that she'd spent her entire life believing had ended before it had properly begun. The early letters were simple, written for a daughter who couldn't yet read them. I hope you're happy today, wherever you are. I think about you every single morning. The later letters grew more complex as the years accumulated, addressing an imagined teenager, then an imagined young adult, each one carrying small updates about Ethan's own life alongside the same unwavering core message repeated, in different words, across 16 consecutive birthdays. I am still looking for you. I have never stopped. I will never stop, for as long as I'm alive to keep looking. She called me that same evening, her hands shaking badly enough. She'd tell me later that she had to set the phone down twice before she could manage to actually dial the number Dorothy had given her. I want to describe what it felt like, answering a call from a number I didn't recognize, hearing a voice say "Dad," with a careful, devastated uncertainty I hadn't heard directed at me in 16 years. But I don't think language fully accommodates what that single word did to me. I sat down on my own kitchen floor. I remember that much clearly, my legs simply refusing to continue holding me upright. And I said her name back to her, just her name, because nothing else available to me in that exact moment felt adequate to the size of what was happening. "They told me you were dead," she said, her voice breaking apart completely. "My whole life, Dad. They told me you died when I was 4. "I'm not dead," I said, which felt like the most useless, insufficient sentence in the English language even as I said it, though it was also, somehow, exactly the sentence that needed saying first. "I've been looking for you for 16 years. I never stopped. I have letters, Lily. I wrote you one every single birthday. I found them," she said. "I'm holding them right now." We talked for almost 4 hours that first call, reconstructing, piece by piece, 2 parallel versions of the same 16 years that had run simultaneously without either of us understanding the other person's version even existed. My search, her grief, the funeral she'd never actually attended, but had somehow absorbed as memory anyway, the photograph on her nightstand, the private investigators I'd hired who'd come so close, more than once, to finding exactly the address Dorothy had been able to provide within a single afternoon. The confrontation with my parents happened the following week, in their own living room, with Lily on speakerphone because she wasn't yet ready. She told me honestly, to be in the same room as the people who'd spent 16 years telling her I was dead. "How could you let me grieve someone who was alive?" she asked them directly, her voice carrying a controlled fury I recognized, distantly, as something I'd inherited from her without ever once having the chance to teach her. "How could you sit across from me at birthday after birthday, knowing exactly where my father was, knowing he was searching for me, and just keep telling me he was dead?" My mother's answer, when it finally came, arrived stripped of every careful justification she'd offered me weeks earlier. "We were afraid," she said. "Afraid of losing you completely if your father found you and built a whole new life around you somewhere far away from us. We told ourselves, for years, that we were protecting you from confusion, protecting the family you'd already built with your mother and Gregory. But the truth is simpler and uglier than that. We were afraid of being alone, and we let that fear become more important than your right to know your own father was alive." I didn't say much during that call, mostly because I understood, listening to my own daughter finally receive the explanation she deserved, that this particular reckoning belonged to her far more than it belonged to me. Lily flew out to see me 3 weeks later, and I drove to the airport 2 hours early, sitting in my car in the parking garage because I couldn't make myself wait calmly inside the terminal, running through every version of what I might say to a daughter I hadn't actually held since she was 4 years old, wrapping her small arms around my leg and asking if I'd be home before dinner. She walked through the arrivals gate carrying a single bag, scanning the crowd with the particular careful uncertainty of someone looking for a face she'd only ever seen in old photographs and 16 years of birthday letters. And when her eyes finally found mine, I watched something complicated move across her face: recognition, disbelief, and underneath both, something that looked, devastatingly, like relief arriving 16 years later than either of us had any right to expect it would. I didn't say anything elaborate when she reached me. I don't think either of us needed elaborate, after everything we'd both already said across that first 4-hour phone call. I just opened my arms, The way I had the very last time I'd seen her. 4 years old and trusting completely that I'd be home before dinner. And she walked into them without hesitation. And we stood together in that crowded airport terminal for a long time. Two people who had spent 16 years missing each other from opposite directions. Finally occupying the same space again. I never stopped looking for you, I told her, into her hair, my voice barely working. I know, she said. I have 16 letters that prove it. We talk every week now, sometimes more, rebuilding a relationship neither of us fully knows how to navigate yet. Given that we're essentially starting as two adults who share a biological history, but very little actual lived memory of each other. It's slower than either of us would prefer, some days. It's also, somehow, exactly enough, because I understand now, after 16 years of searching, that the relationship I'm finally building with my daughter doesn't need to recover the years that were stolen from us. It just needs to exist now, completely and honestly, for whatever years we have left to build it properly. I think about that stack of letters sometimes. 16 envelopes written to a daughter I didn't know if I'd ever actually reach. Each one a small, stubborn act of refusing to let an entire decade and a half of silence convince me she wasn't worth continuing to write to. I'm glad now that I never stopped. I'm glad Dorothy kept that box exactly where I'd asked her to. I'm glad, more than I have words to fully express, that somewhere underneath 16 years of careful, devastating lies, the truth survived in sealed envelopes, waiting patiently for the daughter they were always meant for to finally come looking. She found them. That's the only ending that ever actually mattered.